States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Councilmember Conley?
Present.
Councilmember Losi?
Here.
Councilmember Mobley?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Here.
Mayor Trent? Here. Okay, we have a special presentation from Chief.
Good morning, Mayor Trent. It's not morning, is it? Good evening, Mayor Trent and Honorable City Council. We're here tonight, kind of an auspicious occasion. It's my honor to recognize the exceptional service of Lieutenant Matthew Eberhardt. The council is familiar that from January 3rd through March 15th of this year, I had the privilege of attending the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. During my absence, Lieutenant Eberhardt stepped up to assume the role of acting chief of police. Matt's dedication, leadership, and commitment to our department and community during this period were exemplary. He ensured that our operations continued smoothly and that our officers had the guidance and support they needed. His ability to handle the responsibilities of this role with such professionalism and efficiency is a testament to his character and capability. Tonight, it is my great pleasure to award Lieutenant Matthew Eberhardt the Chief's Award for Leadership. This award is not just a recognition of his service over the past few months, but a symbol of our deep appreciation for his unwavering commitment to our community and to our department. At this time, I'd like to thank you personally, Lieutenant Eberhardt, for not only your outstanding service, but your personal assistance to myself and the department during the time that I was away in Quantico.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much. This is much appreciated. Would not be possible without friendship, mentorship from the chief, and most importantly, our staff. The staff we have here is amazing. They were extremely supportive during this transition in this period of time, and we will continue to do great things. It is a pleasure to be honored. I know that when the chief came here, he told me, he goes, lieutenants do not get awards. And so I know this goes against the grain, but it's definitely a huge honor. Thank you, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, you're the longest officer in our department, aren't you? I didn't want to say oldest. You've been here the longest. Well, congratulations, well deserved. Okay, I'm sure probably most of you are here for the discussion on the wastewater, the proposed wastewater and water increase. So we are going to be having our first public comment is for things that are not on the agenda. The time to speak on the wastewater, we'll be doing a presentation on that, then we'll open public comment, and that's the time to speak on the water and the wastewater. And during public comment, please state your name. We need that for the record. And let's see. Oh, and keep your comment on the subject, and please try to be respectful. So our first public comment is on anything that's not on tonight's agenda. Does anybody have anything to say that's not on the agenda? Come on up.
evening, Chief, Lieutenant, Council. First thing I'd like to say is I love the city of Fortuna and appreciate every one of you. And I had many talks with him when the chief was away, and he treated me very good, and I was very proud of him. I'm proud of our whole town. Anyway, bear with me. I might mumble a little because I'm a little bit nervous about a few things, but well, I have a tenant in Riedel that's causing me eviction problem. I know it's not in Fortuna, but Newsom has made it to where the landlord basically doesn't have any rights. So even though I have this tenant like 4 months behind in rent, I'm getting fined for her garbage by the city of Riedel. Meanwhile, I live in Fortuna, and I have a squatter that's been next to my house for going on 3 years now. They've tore the inside of the house completely apart. They tore the meter off. There's no running water. There's a pile of garbage that's half the tall as this ceiling. All the neighbors have rats. There's cars all over that are unregistered on the street. I don't know why they haven't been tagged and hauled off. I've called Wayne Hansen numerous times. I've contacted a lot of people, and I was told the best thing for me to do is come here and tell you guys. And I'm told the lawyers are working on it, but they ain't working on it fast enough. That should have been gone a year ago. They're selling drugs right openly in the street. There's dogs running around, and the neighbors are getting to the point of vigilantism. I'm kind of away from them, so it doesn't really bother me as much as it does them. I'm kind of speaking for them. I mean, they're about ready to snap on this. There's little kids coming to buy drugs. They should have been cleaned up a long time ago. And there's that, and then I'd also like to inform everybody what happened at my church at St. Mark's. My pastor puts out signs warning about LGBTQ sin. They were vandalized on camera. They were stolen. First they were stolen on camera, and then they were brought back, they were brought back with penises spray painted on them saying, I love gay sex, and I don't have nothing against anybody that's gay. Just leave the children alone. That's all I've ever asked, which leads me to they had their pride event yesterday in Ferndale. And then they congregated at the park. So my pastor wanted to go down there and spread the word of God. As soon as he got there, he got attacked. A guy was yelling at him. I told the guy to leave him alone. The guy got in my face, and then his bodyguard or whatever assaulted me. And then the pastor got assaulted as well. They broke his mic, and the guy was nose to nose with him. And I actually got red-headed black belt to do a story on the first thing I told you about, which is 4 separate hate crimes against our church, stealing the signs, bringing them back, vandalized with vulgar things on them, kicking our signs, and flipping off our sign. She labeled it as a hate crime. I didn't. That's her. And they are hate crimes. So nothing's ever been done by the Ferndale Police Department. The next day, the rainbow flag gets stolen from the courthouse. And they go raid that guy's home.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm done?
Yes.
I usually get like a 1-minute warning left.
Oh, sorry. Our clock
Okay.
doesn't have that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Our next item is consent calendar. We have the city council meetings, report of disbursements, approval of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025 memorandum of understanding concerning working conditions, wages, and benefits for the Fortuna Employees Association, and establish and authorize a supplemental compensation and benefits for management and confidential employees, approval of the full-time classification and pay scale, and approval of wastewater agreement with Ill River Brewery. And anyone want to pull any of those? Nope. Any public comments on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we'll close that.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving into the public hearing. So Brendan is going to give a presentation on the public hearing, and then first we're going to do let's see which one is first. Water. We're going to do the water service first, and then the next item will be the wastewater. So we'll have a presentation on that, and then we'll do some oral comments on that. Then we also have, that's just for the pub. What is this one? This one is for the, let's get pull my papers up here. The public hearing. So
For those that don't know, Brendan Bird is the Director of Public Works for the City of Fortuna.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Trent and Honorable Council. As you mentioned, I'm Brendan Bird, Public Works Director, City Engineer of the City of Fortuna, and I will be here to kick off with a presentation that I'm loading up right now, the public hearing for our Proposition 218 process for our proposed water and sewer rate increases over the next 5 years for the City of Fortuna water and sewer services that we provide. Before I get too into detail, just to provide a little bit of background and structure to the presentation and the hearings themselves, we are proposing increases to both our water and sewer services, which are billed and accounted for separately. With that, we have this hearing procedure broken down into 2 public hearings, one for water and one for sewer. In the noticing process and the way we have treated a lot of it in the past, it's kind of one entity because that's how most of our citizens and folks think about it because it's one bill that they receive. We do have it as 2 public hearings here this evening because they are separate utilities under California Proposition 218. With that being said, any protests or any comments, are taken as a whole and for both, but we do hold 2 hearings in order to account for that. After we go through the public hearing portion of both for both water and sewer, I will turn it over to our finance director, Aaron Felmley, who will present the business item, which is the proposed amendment to the fee schedule in this current fiscal year, which began today. Happy New Year. So with that being said, before we get too deep into the 218 process, I wanted to take a step back and use this as an opportunity to discuss with the council, with the members of public in attendance and members of public, watching online or on TV, how we got here, why we got here, and what the main reasoning is behind having to do the proposed water and sewer rate increases as presented. So the City of Fortuna does operate a potable water and a wastewater collection and treatment system here in Fortuna. It is composed of approximately 100 miles of transmission, distribution, and collection mains and roads. We operate a wastewater treatment plant, a potable water production and disinfection facility, I believe 4 large treatment reservoirs or storage tanks, and then a whole number of smaller pump stations, booster stations. In total, we have well over $100 million in infrastructure asset on the ground at any given time. We also have 16 full-time dedicated employees in the Public Works Department, 2 water and sewer related jobs, engineering, things of that nature, in addition to a number of folks in the finance department or in human resources that play a role in administering and delivering these services to the community and to the City of Fortuna. The City of Fortuna has not adjusted its water and sewer rates in over 10 years, and during that time, costs have continued to, I could say, skyrocket in some areas appreciably. We've seen just in the last 10 years, the construction cost index increase 71%. We've seen staffing costs, insurance costs, materials costs, chemical costs, and improvement costs increase some even more significantly than that during that time. So with that, we've been delivering the services in water and sewer to the community at the same rates that were established as reasonable, I believe, in somewhere between 2011 and 2014. We've been able to do that by really economizing our approach, focusing on only the most important projects, and doing whatever we can to deliver those services as cheaply as we can. But I do have to acknowledge during that time, we have continually had to put less and less money away for future projects, to delay water and sewer rehabilitation projects in the city, and we have continually been understaffed in the Public Works Department. All of those things have played into allowing us to continue to operate at the revenue that we have, but it's been difficult. And in recent years, what we're finding is even with our more conservative approach, we're projecting it operating under revenue. So, that's really kind of a sobering reminder of where we need to move in order to recover costs and really start making those improvements and paying for the operating costs in the years to come, specifically the 5 years that are associated with this planning period and with this process. So with that being said, those are the operations costs. They're a little more well understood. They're a little bit more digestible on a year-to-year basis. One of the largest things that's driving this, both on the water and the sewer side, is infrastructure maintenance and infrastructure improvement and regulatory compliance. So the City of Fortuna experienced a pretty significant development boom between the 50s and the 90s, largely associated with resource industries, timber, fisheries, things of that nature. And with that, a lot of the infrastructure we have was installed during those generations. And that may be the first rehabilitation of really old infrastructure, say in the 60s or the 70s, or the new installation of subdivisions and things of that nature, largely in the 70s through the 90s. With that being said, a lot of our infrastructure is now coming due for rehabilitation for the first time, or potentially rehabilitation for the second time. A common story we have throughout our water and sewer infrastructure is blocked sewer pipes, older sewer pipes, leaky sewer pipes. infrastructure that needs to be rehabilitated for the first time, such as the clarifiers at the wastewater treatment plant that were installed about 20 or 25 years ago, redoing pumps, rehabilitating storage reservoirs like we did last year with our Campton and Hillside water tank recoating projects, and also addressing water main leaks, water main breaks, and older water mains in general. As the council is aware, and I know the community is aware, especially with the one on the boulevard, we've had a number of water main breaks, water leaks from older infrastructure especially in recent months. But this year we've had 13 water main breaks so far, and we don't anticipate that going down. And really, it's just a testament to the fact that we have a lot of older infrastructure that needs to go through its replacement cycle right now. With that being said, we're running around trying to put Band-Aids on a lot of things that we need to consider to repair more holistically. And doing those larger scale repairs are costly. They do take time and they do take money. So the other side of that coin, as opposed to just straight infrastructure maintenance replacement, is regulatory requirements. So as many of us are keenly aware, in the state of California and beyond, regulatory compliance for water and sewer just keeps progressing forward, we'll say. And a few of those main areas that we are feeling the pressure on, specifically in our sewer department, are our compliance schedule and our time schedule order with the regional and state water quality control boards. Those are two compliance schedules that are requiring the city to increase treatment capabilities at the city's wastewater treatment process, in addition to identify a new location for disposal of our treated effluent in the summer months. We are projecting the cost of that project to be upwards of $35 to $40 million. And that's a big need for the reason, and a big reason why our wastewater proposed increases are significantly higher than those for water. Additionally, the city is under a settlement agreement in which we are having to perform inspections and rehabilitations of our sanitary sewer collection assets, of which we have about 55 miles of. And we are also keenly aware of other problems we are having in our sewer system that result in sanitary sewer overflows during wet weather, of which we experienced much of this last year. So with all of that being said, and establishing the need to move forward with collecting enough revenue to operate fully year over year for the next 5 years, in addition to work towards making these planned improvements that we know we need to make and it is time we move forward with. Staff sat down mid-late last year to identify what our timeline would be for delivering and developing a water and sewer rate study. So with that, we contracted with Jacobs Engineering, the city's consultant on our wastewater compliance project, and we brought them in to perform our water and sewer rate study. During the winter months, we worked closely with the Jacobs team to establish, what our revenue requirements are, both for operations and for capital projects. And at the April 15th City Council meeting, we brought forward a draft rate study that presented a proposed approach to adjust our water and sewer rates over 5 years to account for the financials that we had worked through with our consultant Jacobs. That initial approach, which I'll show the summary of here on a subsequent slide, was based highly in doing a very large initial year increase, what we were calling at the time a catch-up increase. Again, it's been 10 plus years since we have performed an adjustment. So the thought at that time was to bring forward a strategy where we catch up entirely within 1 year, and then we can revert to doing smaller, more inflationary adjustments in the remaining 4 years. Smaller adjustments like presumably we should have been doing for a number of years, so where we aren't in the situation we are now. But that's not to say anything about the decisions of the past. This is trying to figure out how we get forward and how we deliver what we need to deliver. So the council provided direction to staff at the tail end of that April 15th meeting to do what we could to lower that first year increase, recognizing that, of course, everybody has tough budgets. There's a lot of worry with inflation and a number of other things. And there's a very significant need and desire to want to try and deliver this as smoothly and as digestibly to the public as possible, not only for optics or anything like that, but just out of true care for wanting to make sure that people can plan for and be able to foresee the costs that are coming and be able to budget for those appropriately and to phase those in over more years as staff can allow. With that, we developed a proposed approach, which I will go through here in a moment. That was presented at the May 6th City Council meeting. And with that, the City Council directed staff to move forward with the Proposition 218 noticing for the water and sewer rates. So given that this is 2 public hearings, I'll focus here first on the water rates. We will conduct that public hearing, or that will be conducted, and then I will do the sewer afterward. But this table right here shows the original proposal for the rate increases. That is the middle column, beginning with 60% going down. Those would have been the 5-year proposed increases in what was presented at the April 15th meeting. As I noted, the council's desire was to see that distributed over all 5 years to the extent possible. So as you'll see on the right-hand column, beginning with 20% in this first fiscal year here, is the proposed rate increases for 5 years that are being discussed and presented as part of this Proposition 218 hearing. In addition to user fees, so that is for water rates specifically for month-to-month usage, we are proposing to adjust the cost of what we call capital connection fees. These are one-time costs for new connections to the system, mostly out of new construction, but sometimes out of residents that have existed, just have never been hooked to utilities before. The proposed approach there is to increase our existing capital connection fees, which you will see on the far left of the table, the far left column that is, and to over 5 years increase them 70%, which is the number of the California Construction Cost Index that has elapsed during the last time that we considered these fees. The initial approach here, I will note, was to do that adjustment in 1 year. At the council's direction, we split that up into 5 even years so we could phase it in over that time. What that means on the water side for an average and minimum monthly user bill, you'll see here on the far left, there's a note on the bar chart for what our current average water bill is, and that's at about $28, $29. And our monthly minimum, of which we have many customers that actually don't go above the minimum usage, is about $23. Under the proposed increases in year 1, that would go up to an average monthly bill of $34 and a minimum of about $28. And over the course of 5 years, it would average, on average, increase to about $60, and with the minimum bill being about $48. And again, this is for water service solely. It's important to think about, and we look at all these things too, what our cost of service is relative to other communities here in the greater Humboldt community. So as you'll see in this chart, should we enact these rate increases as proposed for year 1 here this evening, you'll see our current average user bill combined, I should note this is combined for water and sewer, is $76. If the proposed rate increases go forth this evening, that would jump the average user bill up to $96. Again, this is above the minimum bill. These are measured on the averages. I will note that even with that increase, the City of Fortuna will, for all intents and purposes, be providing the lowest cost of service for water and sewer in the county, essentially matching McKinleyville Community Services District and significantly below Eureka, Humboldt Community Services District, Arcata, the City of Riadell, and the town of Scotia, which is not shown on this graph, but I believe would be the highest of all of the local utility providers. I will note that, of course, these continue to increase beyond year 1, and we don't have a graph that shows that, but we would anticipate over 5 years being somewhere in between what Eureka and Humboldt Community Services District is shown now. I will note a number of those agencies are also moving through rate increases annually year over year. So as we go up, so will they, and we still anticipate being at or near the bottom in overall cost of service to our community. And again, we don't look at this trying to pinpoint what we find is reasonable or justifiable from a water and sewer service charge perspective. You know, under Prop 218 and what we would do anyway is look at what our cost of services for our infrastructure and our operations. We just like to see where that falls in comparison to these other communities as we think about what the how much service we can provide to our citizens for the cost that we come up with. And we're always happy to say that we seem to be able to find a way to deliver lower cost services than those around. So with all that being said, on May 6th, as noted before, the council directed staff to move forward with the Proposition 218 hearing process. So subsequent to that meeting, staff worked with our engineering consultant Jacobs to finalize our notice of public hearing, or what we call our Proposition 218 mailer, in addition to a supplementary frequently asked questions handout, both of which were prepared and mailed out to all of our property owners in the city of Fortuna, in addition to being supplemented by users that live in Fortuna and are presumably renting properties and that aren't the owner of record. So moving in, these next 3 slides talk a little bit more about the timeline. They are all a little wordy, so by all means, if there's any questions, I'm happy to elaborate on any of those at the closure. After finishing the mailers, the city and our staff worked with a local printing and mailing company, and we sent the mailers that went out on May 17th, which began the 45-day noticing period, which is required under California Proposition 218. Again, those mailers were sent out to all folks that we identified on the most recent county property tax roll, which is the standard method or procedure recommended for Proposition 218. And we also decided to supplement that by finding folks that lived in those properties that were presumably renters based on information that we had in our water and sewer billing system. So overall, we have about 4,600 utility connections in the city of Fortuna, but we ended up sending out about 5,400 mailers, again, trying to get the information out to as many folks as we could. As part of that, we also developed what we referred to in the mailer as written protest procedures. This is a Proposition 218 hearing, so the proposed rate increases are noticed, and folks, of course, are able to protest or make their opinions known on what is being proposed. And with that, there is what we call a valid or a verified way in order to make a certified protest. And those principally include that the protest must be written, it must be legible, it must be signed by the property owner or ratepayer. And I'll note that only 1 protest per parcel is allowed under Prop 218. So once a parcel is voted, that counts as 1 vote. And it can't be more if there's renters or property owners that are all submitting protests. The protest must be received before the closure of the public hearing, which is here this evening. And the protest must clearly state in writing that it is a protest to the proposed rate increases. I will note that although, of course, comment during public comment is more than welcome, and we appreciate everybody's feedback during this hearing, verbal comments do not count towards the overall tally for the Proposition 218 process. So the city has been receiving protests since the time we sent out the mailers, and those have been going through the city clerk's office. They have been in charge of cataloging, documenting, and maintaining records and verifying their validity. Those records will be retained, including anything received here this evening, and held for 2 years, which is the minimum as recommended by California Proposition 218. To report to the council, and I know that our city clerk, Sienna Emmons, and our deputy city clerk, Ashley Chambers, will be able to report in more detail on this at the closure of public hearing. But as of 4 p.m. today, the city had received 270 verified protests. So these are protests that have been verified as legitimate, not duplicates for properties and things of that nature. I do believe the actual number, and Ashley can correct me if I'm wrong, is closer to 350. For Proposition 218, a simple majority, which is 50% plus 1, is the threshold to which would have to be exceeded in order for the water and sewer rate increases to be turned down by people protesting. So that results, and I believe I actually have this number on the next slide, but might as well get into it now. If we have 4,600 approximately utility service connections in Fortuna, we would need to receive approximately 2,300 verified valid protests in order for the proposed rate increases to be overturned. And lastly, as we close public hearing, the city clerk will give a report on the total number of unverified protests. I'll call them unverified for now because it does take some time to move through and make sure all the boxes are checked as part of a protest. Depending on the number we receive, that could take some time. But I can discuss that more in a moment here. So I touched on the number of utility connections and the threshold that would be required for a majority report under California Proposition 218, and that's a majority protest, I should say. So if less than the majority are received at the closure of the public hearing, staff would recommend adopting Resolution 2024-21A. This is a resolution that was developed alongside with the city attorney that would certify the results of a non-majority protest under California Proposition 218, specifically for the proposed increases over 5 years to the water side of the city's utility. If a majority or more of protests are received by the closure of public hearing, staff would likely recommend continuing the hearing so that staff could sit down and go through all the protests received and verify them and make sure that they were legitimate as far as the counting of the protest number in there. Moving through that, at a subsequent hearing, staff would recommend adopting Resolution 2024-21B, which is a resolution certifying a majority protest vote in response to the proposed water rate increases specifically. So with that said, I'll move forward with my recommendation at this time, which is that the council open and conduct a public hearing to receive written and verbal testimony regarding the proposed water rate increases in accordance with California Proposition 218, to subsequently close public hearing and have the city clerk report on the number of total unverified protests received at the end of public hearing, and then to adopt either Resolution 2024-21A for a non-majority protest or 2024-21B for a majority protest. With that, I really appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over to the council.
Thank you. Ashley, how many do we have included the unverified ones?
Two.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council?
Yeah, I got a comment to make that over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've gotten some phone calls. I've run into people in the store, at church, and the question I got most often was, well, what happened to the money from the last rate increase? And I worked in Public Works here when the last rate increase was going on. And we, in the last few years, have replaced the liner and the Vansel Reservoir, a 5 million gallon reservoir. We've torn down a 2 million gallon tank on Stewart Street and replaced it with a concrete, sturdy, more aesthetically pleasing, has a wrought iron fence instead of a chain link fence, landscaped. But mainly it's sturdy and is not in danger of landslides and leakage. We replaced a seismically vulnerable tank on Holman Way at the top of Home Avenue and replaced that with a pressure system that is more able to feed the homes up there. You can actually take a shower. If someone's running the faucet downstairs, you can still take a shower upstairs if you have a 2-story house. And that's on the water side, as well as after a hydraulic study that studied the circulation of water through our distribution system, we removed some bottlenecks. We set it to where the pressure zones are more equal throughout the city, made it easier to isolate sections if you had to do a repair. After that, going on to the sewer side, we did a major upgrade at the sewer plant, wastewater treatment plant, correct usage of the verbs, and made it to where we upgraded it so we could continue to grow as a city and accommodate new houses, new commercial development, new industrial development, as well as get a better effluent that is more in keeping with what the state wanted. Well, now the goalposts have been moved, and we have to upgrade our effluent that we discharge from the wastewater treatment plant. We planned ahead, but we couldn't know that they were going to change the requirements for that. So we are good stewards of the money that our ratepayers pay. We plan things out. If you look at our mission statement up here, we fulfill that. We have well-planned, efficient, timely services for our public. But we cannot know what is going to happen in the regulatory world. And as well as now, the interest rates have gone up in this time. Our bonds would be more expensive. Grants are fewer and further between. And while we do look for funding sources, we can't always find them before we need to make changes and upgrades. So I just want you to know that that is what happened with the money from the last rate increase. So I hope that clears up confusion in that. So Thank you.
Any other comments from council? No? Okay, at this time, we're going to open and conduct a public hearing to receive all written and verbal testimony regarding the proposed water rates and consider the results of the protest proceedings according with Proposition 218. And please keep your comments respectful and focused to the issue on hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. And when speaking, please state your name so we can have that for the record. So I now open public comment. Anybody like to make a comment? Come up to the mic, please. I don't like public speaking either.
My name is Karen Denny. I've been a resident of Fortuna for about 20 years. So short and to the point. In your notice of public hearing, you talked about your bullet points, maintain and improve financial stability and reserves, and also the last bullet, generate funds to support preferably pay-as-you-go future capital funding. It goes against the California Constitution. Article 13D, subsection 6, B, number 4, no fee or charge may be imposed for a service unless that service is actually used by or immediately available to the owner of the property in question. Fees or charges based on potential or future use of service are not permitted. And that is our California Constitution. So I request that the council reevaluate your proposal for increases and comply with the California Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Mike Flockhart, live in Hydesville, but I do have some rental properties here in town. So I'm going to be honest with you. This proposal hurts. It hurts people with a fixed income. It hurts young families that are living paycheck to paycheck. Typically, on a fourplex right now, the minimum water bill is $248.96. $250. Sometimes it goes $260, $270. With this water and wastewater proposal, at the end of 5 years, each one's the actual usage is going to be over 100%, 200% total. So that water bill goes to $800. Which means one of two things. Either I charge my tenants an extra $200 a month, which they can't afford, or I just end up eating it, and there goes the profit out of it. So that's the reality of it. It's quite a bit to swallow. I wish, the past 10 years we bumped it up a buck a year or something, so it doesn't hurt all of a sudden to do it. But if you look at the revenue, I looked at online at the 2023-24 budget. The new one wasn't posted yet. The revenue for water is $2.4 million. CIP expenses are $1.6 million. I looked at the CIP list, and I worked with Mike here and retired in 2014. There's still projects on there from when I was there that are 15, 20 years old. And if you put $100,000 in the budget every year for a project that doesn't get done for 15 or 20 years, what happens to that money? Does it roll back into the general fund? Does it go to wages? I mean, that's a lot of money that's not getting spent, that's being allocated in the budget. Almost every department is benefiting from the water and wastewater funds. If you look at the allocations from the city manager down,
1 minute.
It's 0.20 to 0.45 for this department, and admin and engineering and parks and rec and general services before you even get to the public works employees. So it's funding most of the city. I see the debt service that was refinanced from 2006 in 2017 and to be paid off in 2036. That's $5.4 million at 3% for just the water. The wastewater was $8.7 million, And then the redevelopment agency a year later was $8.6 million that the ratepayers are going to pay for. So I do have I just didn't come to gripe. I do have a proposal. I've heard the city has been possibly proposing doubling Measure E, which is a 3/4% tax, which would be a percent.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, thank you. I'll finish it in the wastewater side.
I'll catch up with you.
Any other comments?
My name's Bryce Lester. I live in Hydesville as well, but I have some apartments here. And I just wanted to say that, I do understand the city needs to make improvements and take care of the infrastructure. We all use it, and it's very important. But it was interesting that Karen's comment and Mike's comment, they're much more informed than I am. Unfortunately, I'm not as smart as they are. But I do have a lot of empathy for the tenants that I have, and I just want to come and express my concern for them and the hardship that it's going to impose on them, because the way that I structure my rent is there's not much profit in what I'm doing, but I'm making affordable housing, I feel, for my tenants, and they appreciate where they live. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to price some of them out of being able to live there if the rates are truly have to be increased to the extent that they're talking about. And the way I figured it was it's almost going to triple what they're paying now at the end. But that, I don't know if that math is correct. It was kind of conjecture. But anyway, that was all I had to say. I just wanted to speak on behalf of my tenants. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
I just have some protest to deliver to somebody. Do I have to say anything here? Oh, good.
Hey guys, Abe Stevens. I'm a local resident. I spoke briefly at a council meeting several weeks ago. Just wanted to reiterate my concern regarding the 1-inch water rate specifically for residential use. I live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house here in Fortuna. Our rate is going to, essentially double to almost, almost $100 a month, or maybe it will be $100 a month for just the water, depending on our usage, which compared to, and the reason we have a 1-inch meter is because we have residential fire sprinklers, and that's the only reason. We don't use any more water than in, a residence that has a 5/8 meter. So to me, just looking at the $500+ I'll be spending a year, it feels a little unfair, and makes me wonder if the way the rates were allocated to different meter sizes was properly reviewed by the city or the Jacobs report. And again, I think the report said the rates were based on anticipated demand, but I know we're not going to spend any more or use any more water than a similar size house. And in the event there was an actual fire and the fire sprinklers actually needed a surge of water, I would suspect that would still be less demand than the fire department would need to fight a fire in a house without sprinklers. So anyway, I was kind of taking it personally, it's the water rates going up so much for us and for other homes that have residential fire sprinklers. So, and I'm not sure if the rates are going to be fixed for good or if the council can make fine adjustments to them once they're approved. Is that something you guys can answer? I'm just kind of curious.
He's writing down some of the questions at the end of public hearing.
And then I think, and at the last meeting, Brendan did clarify that the connection fees for the 1-inch meter were going to be subsidized or would be set at the 5/8 meter if it was only for, the 1-inch meter was only for fire sprinklers. And so it kind of would make sense that there would be a similar adjustment for the monthly rate for homes with a the only reason they have a 1-inch meter is because they have fire sprinklers. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing. Brendan, do you want to answer any of those questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I did write down some questions, and I'm going to answer as many of them to the best of my ability here for the council and for the public's information. Happy to have further discussions outside of this forum, of course, too. In regards to the question about the California Constitution, some of that specific language in there, I would have to defer to the city attorney on. But in reference to the specific things about pay-as-you-go, that's an approach that the city of Fortuna has always tended to take, and what that really means is trying to avoid paying for projects or doing things where we're debt financing that activity. Realistically, the city being conservative and specifically fiscally conservative, the thought has always been, if you pay for the costs up front, you avoid financing costs, which ultimately make things significantly more expensive, similar to how many of us can see on our mortgage for a $400,000 home, you effectively buy it twice over the life of the loan. So that's in regards to the pay-as-you-go financing piece. Another question was on what happens to the money for costs, the money for projects that have not been completed. What I'll note over the last 10 years in the CIP is just because activity is identified in the CIP, it does not mean that there is revenue for it and that was actual, quote-unquote, fully budgeted activity. We do have a lot of projects that have gone forward year over year in our capital improvement program. And a large reason for that in the years that have approached is because our revenues don't support, outside of dipping deeper and deeper into the contingency funds, completing those projects. So the money that goes within and comes in as enterprise funding, it stays as enterprise funding, and that's the only thing it can be used for, and our finance director can probably add to or speak more specifically to that. But that money, it doesn't go away. It funds operations, and if it doesn't get used by operations or projects, it goes into the reserves. And that's why we have the reserves that we currently do now. But I will note those reserves aren't growing, they're shrinking, because we are using them for project and operating costs currently. In regards to the portions of water and sewer funds that pay staff positions, there are a number of positions outside of the Public Works Department that have percentage allocations. And again, our finance director could probably speak more eloquently to that than I can. Those are specifically associated with, figuring out the portions of a job description that go towards enterprise funding. But going back to it, water and sewer funds collected through rates can only be paid to water and sewer service activities. So as you'll see, most of our public works folks outside of the streets department are paid very heavily, if not exclusively, from our water and sewer funds. But there are portions such as finance and other administrative activities. The services we're delivering to the city largely are utility-based, and because of that, there's folks in many other departments that play a role in delivering that service, even if they're not the one operating the treatment plant or doing things of that nature. As a point of clarification, just because I heard a few responses to it, so over 5 years, we would anticipate the sum total of the adjustments to roughly double the average user bill. So right now, I think we're at about 78 as an average. And the average would go up, I believe, somewhere between $145 and $150 in 5 years. So roughly doubling, not tripling or quadrupling, as some folks may have thought. But I have plenty of information that I'm happy to share in more detail on that if needed. And the last, in response to our last comment, which was on the meter costs in there, those are put together also to recover costs for the infrastructure itself. So the usage plays a component to it in meter size. We also look at the cost of replacing meters, of replacing service laterals, of replacing the components to do the radio read and some other things. So there are some costs that are associated as increase higher for a 1-inch meter as opposed to a 3/4-inch meter. They get more and more expensive as you add parts and you do service and replacements to some of those areas. So that's what I have in response to those. I appreciate everybody's comments, and if you have any questions or you would like Aaron to elaborate on any of those other items, by all means.
Does council have any questions? Address.
Just a quick comment. We've had quite a few meetings, workshops and public meetings with regard to all of these. So we've had all of our questions already answered either by staff. So that's why you're not hearing any questions coming from us, because they've pretty much been answered already. We've already had these hearings, and so just want to let you know, we're not up here with deaf ears. We're hearing what you're saying, and we've asked the questions that you are asking. So, thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming and expressing your concerns. We all have the same concerns too. Nobody wants to raise prices, but at some point, we do have to cover our expenses.
Mayor Trent, we do have some attendees via Zoom right now, and I just wanted to give them an opportunity to raise their hands at this time on Zoom to let me know if they'd like to make a public comment before we end.
Okay.
So if you are participating by Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment at this time, if you could please either unmute yourself and let me know, or raise your hand so I can see it. Doesn't look like any.
Okay. So do we have?
First, I did want to thank Brendan and Aaron and staff for putting everything together and making it easily understood. It was very helpful. And we didn't do a count on the unverified. Before we make a motion.
There are a total of 372 verified and unverified protests at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-21A, certifying that the number of valid written protests were not received from property owners representing a majority of the parcels subject to the proposed rate increase.
I'll second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Resolution 2024-21A, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna, California, setting forth the results of the protests in connection with water rate hearing conducted pursuant to the requirements of Proposition 218. Councilmember Conley?
Aye.
Councilmember Losi?
Yes.
Councilmember Mobley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Trent?
Yes. Okay, our next item is a public hearing, Proposition 218, majority protest process relative to proposed increase to wastewater sewer rates. Do we have the staff report, please?
Yes, I will be providing this one as well, and thank you again for the time. And I'm going to get my presentation up and running here again. So, as I noted, there are two public hearings because we are specifically treating water and sewer as standalone Proposition 218 hearings, as they are separate enterprise utilities. I will be more brief in this follow-up one. The focus here is more to present the rates themselves, specifically for the sewer, and then that will move into another opportunity for a public hearing and another opportunity for folks to provide their verbal or written testimony, and also to report on that number specifically for the sewer, the protest number. So I showed in a previous slide the proposed adjustments to the water rates. This is the equivalent version for the sewer rates, presented the same way. So in the center column, beginning at 40% and going down, you'll see what was the original approach to increasing the sewer rates that was presented at the April 15th, 2024 meeting. Again, the council's desire to spread that out, the cost over more years to the extent practicable. And that's what resulted in what was presented at May 6th and what was authorized with staff to move forward with the Proposition 218 noticing. I will note that compared to the water rates, you'll see that they're not quite as spread out as much as we were able to do with water. This is largely due to how much of our infrastructure liability is tied up into our sanitary sewer system, specifically with our wastewater project and some of the sewer rehabilitation activities. It just requires that we start recovering and paying for those costs a little bit sooner than we need to do in our water system. Moving to capital connection fees, again, something that is proposed to be adjusted as well. As you'll see in the far left column, for a standard capital connection at 14 fixture units, our current fee is $4,445, and our current cost per additional fixture is $318. So if you have a house that has more than 14 fixture units, you get charged as a per cost after that. Those would increase by about 70% over 5 years in incremental steps year over year as proposed, and then ending up all the way into the column you see on the right in 5 years. What would that look like as far as an average and minimum user bill on the wastewater side? So as you'll see, in current times, our average wastewater bill is $47 approximately, and our minimum is $40. That would grow to $61 and change in this coming year if approved, with a minimum bill of about $55, and that would grow all the way up to approximately $105 as an average, and just over $80 for a minimum. There is a lot more variation on our sewer side, and I will note that delivering sewer services and wastewater treatment is inherently larger and more expensive than water delivery, and it requires more process and more expense. That's why there's so much more cost, even at the baseline, tied to that. Throw into that the number of regulatory compliance issues that we're facing between our settlement agreement, between our time schedule order and our compliance schedule, and between some of the other rehabilitation activities we need to do. Realistically, over 5 years and probably beyond that, we just have more cost burden in the sewer area than we do in the water area. So with that, unless the council has any specific questions that they have for me on the sewer side, I would recommend, similar to the water, that the council open and conduct a public hearing to receive all written and verbal testimony for the sewer rates in accordance with California Proposition 218. After taking all public comment and any additional protests that folks may have, close the public hearing and adopt either Resolution 2024-22A for a non-majority protest result for sanitary sewer rate increases, or Resolution 2024-22B for a majority protest to the proposed sanitary sewer rate increases. And with that, happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Any questions from staff? From council?
The protest letters, do they have to specify water and wastewater, or they're for both? Okay.
They're for both.
Just clarification, Brendan, you mentioned the resolution is 2024-22A and B. Is that directing
The attorney provided C and D for the wastewater rates.
So which would it be, C and D then?
Yeah.
It will be 2024-22C.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Losi. So yes, it's A and B were specific, the resolutions for the water, C and D being for sewer. So thank you for the clarification.
Any more questions from council? Okay, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody have any comments on the wastewater?
Sue Long, I just wanted to clarify. Oh, did I? Sorry. Oops, that's fast. I just wanted to clarify something that Brendan said. When he said that the projects that were not completed, the money went back into the reserves. Those are the water and wastewater reserves, not the general fund reserves. So just a clarification for the public on that.
Mike Flockhart again. So I only have one question on the sewer, and I'm probably wasting my time. It all sounds like it's cut and dried here. But on Palmer Creek, your sewer service charges, City of Fortuna residential current is $38.75 for the first 500 cubic feet. Palmer Creek is $168.02 for the first 2,590 cubic feet. So if you multiply 38.75 times 5, which would be the equivalent of Palmer Creek's cubic footage, it's about $200 a month. So down at the bottom it says outside city limits pays 1.5 times that inside city limits rate. But how come Palmer Creek is much cheaper? And if you look at it by the volume,
Address your
it's
comments to the council.
it's much cheaper, and it's supposed to be 1 times. It looks like the city of Fortuna residents are subsidizing Palmer Creek. Why is that? And if you look at the volume on your table here, it's, you know, it's 6.49 per cubic foot, and residential's paying 8.61. And then if you go out 5 years, it's 1922, and Palmer Creek's at 1448. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
Just one quick question that I was still curious about from my previous one is just out of my own curiosity if the council is going to have any flexibility to make adjustments to these rates, or if they're going to be set in stone for the next 5 years. And then just also curious, I heard mentioned a couple times that, you know, one predicament or one reason why we're in this kind of big rate increase because we didn't make adjustments for inflation. Just curious if that was under consideration to add inflation adjustments onto the end of the 5-year term, if they could adjust more over time. And if it was going to do that, if that could lessen the burden of the big rate increases right now. Because with the math, it kind of seems like they're trying to pay everything in the 5 years to last for, years beyond. But if, we add an inflation adjustment, it seems like it would maybe, lessen the burden now and put us in a position in the future where we don't have to have such a giant bump. Oh, and also just to reiterate, I think with the last comment too, with the Palmer Creek and my concern with the 1-inch, sewer rates. It seems like the Jacobs report really did focus on just how are we going to pay our bills, but didn't really look at how the demand and the usage among all the different users are allocated. I think they're just assuming that the rates from 10 plus years ago were good enough that they didn't need to be reviewed. And so I think I was just a little disappointed that they didn't take a closer look at with modern users and current usage in different locations, are the rates that we had in the past still applicable, and should we kind of keep going with those rates rather than kind of making some fine tuning. But in any case, I guess maybe I'm a little too late for that at this point. But thanks again.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Polly Kinsinger. My address is 211 Newell Drive. We purchased our home a few years ago with the understanding that we were buying a small home with an ADU built downstairs in the basement. With this rate increase, we now will pay, we already pay 2 sewers and 2 waters because of the small ADU, but our home is a tiny little 2-bedroom, 1-bath upstairs and a bachelor with a 1-bath downstairs. And already the bathroom downstairs and all the wastewater goes into a sewer system, into a septic tank, into a septic line. And we're paying sewer for that. And I'm wondering if it's possible with this rate increase to revisit the opportunity to maybe take that off of sewer, because this is going to be a huge hit to us as we go forward. When we bought the home, we were told that that property had already been dealt with and it was not something we could revisit. So I'm wondering and hoping that maybe Public Works can revisit it with us and see if it's possible to put our lower sewer off of the sewer fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. And Brendan, if you need time to look up any of those answers or anything, we could always have them email you a question. So anyway, if you need time to look up any of those answers, you can have them email you.
If you're interested in me fielding,
Well, I'm gonna
answering
go
those
to-
questions, I'm prepared to in
Okay.
these cases. But.
Is there any online?
Are there any public speakers participating via Zoom that'd like to make public comment at this time?
None? Okay, we'll close public comment at this time. Are there any of those that you're prepared to answer, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak speak to the ones I can. In regards to our special sanitary sewer treatment agreement with Palmer Creek, one of the major areas we do there is we charge them all as one customer and not individually. So the base rate that's included in that calculation, that's spread out over a lot of users, so it goes away pretty quickly. It's not base rates for individual users on their system. And they're operated under a special sewer treatment agreement, and we treat them differently under that agreement because there's a lot of components to what goes in the cost for the city, as far as maintenance and operation of collection mains and laterals and a lot of things that we do that we don't do for Palmer Creek Community Services District. They take care of that under their operations. So largely what they're paying for is the use of a small section of transmission main and then treatment at the treatment plant, not a lot of the other things. So that's why their costs have been historically calculated differently. They do have a completely different calculation strategy that usually takes them at or above the other limits as associated in the city's budget. But again, they're under a special treatment agreement, recognizing the infrastructure they don't use and just the infrastructure they do. To reiterate a point I brought up in the beginning of the presentation, but of course, happy to clarify. So these public hearing items are intended to act as responding to the Proposition 218 protest and not necessarily the actual cost to be adopted. That'll be covered in the subsequent business item presented by our finance director. And lastly, the approach on inflationary adjustments in the future, and that's a really good question. And I think that's really where we want to get to as a city and as a staff is, these rate increases that we are presenting are somewhat a result of not incrementally changing it over time. And what we're trying to do by the end of it is get to a point where we have somewhat righted the ship and we can go back to where we're just doing smaller inflationary adjustments year over year to where we can keep things, creeping along with kind of the usual cost of service as opposed to having to play from behind like we are right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for Brendan. So with regard to Palmer Creek, is the city of Fortuna subsidizing their wastewater?
No, we are not. Yeah. It's just different based on looking at what they're actually paying for, the services they're paying for, which is just sewer treatment, not collections.
Any other?
A while back, you addressed the shortfall between the revenues coming in and the actual cost of service going out. So could you address that, the disparity between what the rates coming in are for water and wastewater and what the actual cost of service is going out?
Yeah, and I would actually say that our finance director could probably give a more precise answer in here. I do know for a number of years we have been operating below revenue on our water side specifically. That is where we have had more challenges, and that has also played into some of the discussions we've had about the city's bond coverage and things of that nature. On the wastewater side, I think we've been operating more neutral, but recently, especially with our project activity kicking up for the wastewater compliance project, we're projecting operating at a deficit and having to offset those costs with operating reserves and capital reserves. And again, bringing online more projects, which is what we intend to do, would further exacerbate that problem where, in recent years, we've had a more measured approach to how many of those enterprise projects that we're biting off year over year. Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
One other thing I'll point out, and this was brought up in some of our special workshops, was the city's plan when we reduced that initial 60% on the water side down to 2020, was that we're actually dipping into our reserves and going below what our reserve kind of comfortable level is, and then building it back up over year 4 and 5. So, for just the water side, we are anticipating taking $1 million out of reserves, even with the 20% increase for fiscal year 24-25. So we won't even be covering our costs with that 20% increase for the first year.
Just real quick, if I could, in one of the workshops also, it was mentioned just for the operations end of it, we're taking out $200,000 a year out of the enterprise reserve fund.
Yes, that's correct. So the current fiscal year we are in, we had about a $200,000 deficit just for operations. That does not include any of our capital improvement projects. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that a little bit, just for folks that may not know. Our proposed approach to increase rates also significantly depletes the city's operating and capital reserves over these years. So we are taking that into account. The increases that we are applying, the only reason that we can do the approach where we're making them as low as we are, and I say as low, recognizing that they're still high, for folks that are on budgets and things like that, is we are offsetting how big they need to be by really leaning into the reserves that we've been able to build over time, largely through savings year over year. And then by the end of 5 years, we will start to be on a positive trend again, but with significantly fewer reserves. So we are using that as an opportunity to alleviate the increased burden. So I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Okay, and thank you, Brendan, for all the work that you put into this and the great presentations on both wastewater and water. So do we have a motion from the council? Oh. Do you want to verify the
A
protest?
total of 372 verified and unverified written protests.
Thank you. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-22C, certifying that the number of valid written protests were not received from property owners representing a majority of the parcels subject to the proposed rate increase.
I'll second.
Okay, do we have a roll call vote?
Resolution 2024-22C, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna, California, setting forth the results of protests in connection with wastewater rate hearing conducted pursuant to the requirements of Proposition 218. Councilmember Conley?
Aye.
Councilmember Losi?
Yes.
Councilmember Mobley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Trent?
Yes. Okay, now we'll move on to city business. Consider adopting schedule of fees and charges for water service, Resolution 2024-23. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. So I do want to thank our Public Works Director, Brendan Bird. He did the heavy lifting for us tonight. And so this resolution really piggybacks off of the 2 public hearings that the council just conducted. This is the formal adoption of the first year, which is, and we're just doing water here, so it'll be the 20% for water, as well as the capital connection fee increases. And so in future years, each year, we'll be bringing forward the rates that were included within the 5-year chart that our Public Works Director went through, and the council does have the discretion to change those in future years if costs and revenue warrant those changes. But for this item, staff is recommending adopting the 20% for the water fees and making them effective July 1st, 2024 by adopting Resolution 2024-2023. And if there's any questions, staff is happy to answer those.
Any questions from council? Okay. We'll open public hearing. Does anybody have any public comments on this item? Is there any online? No? Okay, then I guess we'll close public comment.
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2024-23 and read by title only.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Roll call, please.
Resolution 2024-23, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna adopting a schedule of fees and charges for water service and finding the action exempt from CEQA. Councilmember Conley?
Aye.
Councilmember Losi?
Yes.
Councilmember Mobley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Trent?
Yes. Here, our next item is consider adopting schedule of fees and charges for wastewater service. Resolution 2024-24.
Thank you. So again, this is just for the wastewater service, and this is to incorporate the first year, which was 30% for our wastewater fees, and incorporating those into the city's adopted fee schedule. And so it is staff's recommendation to adopt Resolution 2024-24 and include the 30% and the capital connection fee increases into the city's wastewater fee schedule. And if there's any questions, staff's happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Okay, we'll open public comment. Is there any comments from the public? Is there any online?
I don't see any.
Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment.
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-24 and read by title only.
And I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Roll call, please.
Resolution 2024-24, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna adopting a schedule of fees and charges for wastewater service and finding the action exempt from CEQA. Councilmember Conley?
Aye.
Councilmember Losi?
Yes.
Councilmember Mobley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Trent?
Yes. Okay, and we don't have a city manager's report tonight. And any future agenda items? None. So we'll move on to city council reports. Councilmember Conley?
Yeah, we had a REDAC meeting. They took us on a field trip down to Riedel that was new for us. We got to go sit in the chambers there and got a presentation by the Riedel city manager on their lot usage that they're trying to get back from the state of California that kind of swooped it under their nose, apparently. But other than that, it was good. Just enjoying the nice weather and still playing baseball.
Councilmember Mobley?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson? Oh, I was trying to make the meeting move along a little faster. Sorry. Councilmember Losi?
So that means I don't. I have nothing to report except on the 8th of this month, I will be a part of a selection committee interviewing two candidates for the empty LAFCO position. So it'll be interesting. It'll be quick, I'm sure. Only two positions.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Well, we had our North Deal meeting with Caltrans and some things that they're doing from their report is, one is a safety audit on Highway 199 and 197 in Del Norte County, looking at what they can do for safety. I had a nice item that motorcycle riders would like, but our other motorcycle rider left. Caltrans now has a barrier that goes over a guardrail that cushions the impact should something happen there and you motorcycle riders goes down. It keeps them from slamming into the guardrail and the support beams underneath. Other things happening, having a stakeholder meeting in August for the Fern Bridge project as they look for a replacement for that. Been assured that they are doing it around the fair, not during the fair. Also that the Eureka Arcata Corridor project, in spite of the delay over the winter, is still on schedule and looks to be completed by late 2025. Also, we had a Transportation, Communication, and Public Works meeting, and some things on that were the broadband grants, the middle mile project, which is getting the broadband cabling to the residential areas, to the towns, cities. And they did a budget update, but we know that they just adopted the budget today, or actually yesterday, and it's totally different than what the update was at the TCPW meeting from the League of California Cities. Some things from HCOG that benefit Fortuna is well, one thing going back to the Caltrans meeting, we did get funded for our Gateway project, and it is still moving forward up by Double D's and C. Crane Company. As you come into town, a nice gateway entry there. And we also have North Deal. On HCOG, we had the bike and ped 2% allocations going out. Fortuna didn't request any of that, but we have used it before for the Redwood Way project, completing a gap in the sidewalk going from up past the creek all the way up to the hospital there. But this time, Arcata and Ferndale, as well as Blue Lake and Eureka. But Arcata's using theirs for bike and ped counters, which I have used pedestrian counters before, where we're going to do upgrades, add some sidewalk, used them on Ross Hill Road because of the school coming in and the churches there. And they're a godsend when you can get them. And they have some better ones now than they used to have, and Arcata's upgrading theirs. Also, they do kindergarten through 8th grade bike education and a bike rodeo. So that's going to good use there. Ferndale's doing a sidewalk project with ADA upgrades to it, and connectivity from town out to Russ Park, a study to see how to do that safely. So we see our County Association of Governments funding going for good, solid projects, and that's what I have today.
Thank you. Okay. We're just now starting our event season. This is the fun time of year. Wednesday of this week, Fortuna will be doing our fireworks festival. We're still looking for a few volunteers if anybody's interested in volunteering, and that starts at 5:30 with games, food, vendors, a bunch of stuff going on at the park, and then the fireworks will start after dark. Then we have a new event coming to Fortuna this weekend. It's a traditional rodeo, and the people putting this on have done a lot of work to the rodeo grounds. I've seen some painting and new fences going up, so that will be interesting to see, and hopefully they're looking at maybe making that an annual event also. And then we have our week-long rodeo week, which is always a lot of fun and a lot of different, check the schedule because there's a lot of things going on that week. And then we move right into Auto Expo. So we have a really busy month. Our next city council meeting will be August 5th because we don't want to make people choose between whether they want to watch the city council meeting or go to the chili cook-off. I know that would be a hard decision. So, and that's all of my report. That means we're canceling the one at the end of this month, July 15th one. And now we're going to be adjourning to closed session. Pull that back up. Conference with labor negotiators, city manager, Merritt Perry, employees, organizations, the unrepresented management group in accordance with section 54957.6 of the government code. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion we adjourn to closed session.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this meeting.